The broken promise, the twin suns of Meridian Prime, cast long shadows across the settlement as Captain Marcus Reed stood on the observation deck of the Horizon's Edge, watching civilian transports load evacuees. 6 months had passed since humanity signed the Treaty of Silence, a document promising peace through disarmament. The politicians had called it wisdom. Marcus called it suicide. "Captain, incoming transmission from the Vortan fleet," Lieutenant Jade Winters announced, her voice tight with tension. She brushed a strand of dark hair from her face. Her jaw set with the same determination Marcus had come to respect over 3 years of service together. Marcus turned from the viewport, his weathered features hardening. "Put them through." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing Admiral Cross, a towering figure whose segmented armor gleamed like polished obsidian. His 4 amber eyes burned with cruel amusement as he regarded the human captain. "Captain Reed." Cross's voice rumbled through the bridge, translated into harsh syllables. "Your species chose surrender disguised as diplomacy. Now you will learn the price of weakness. Meridian Prime belongs to the Vortan Empire." "The treaty," Marcus began. "Was a test," Cross interrupted, his mandibles clicking with what might have been laughter. "One your pathetic leaders failed. You dismantled your defenses. You scattered your fleets. You made yourselves prey." The transmission cut off. Jade's hands moved across her console with practiced efficiency. 16 Vortan warships dropping out of hyperspace. They're forming attack formations around the colony. Marcus watched the tactical display populate with hostile contacts, each one representing enough firepower to glass the settlement below. The Horizon's Edge was a research vessel, barely armed, with a crew of 38 scientists and skeleton military staff. "By every measure they should run. Captain, we need to evacuate," urged Commander Philip Stone, the ship's executive officer. "We can't fight this." Marcus's mind raced through calculations. 3,000 colonists still on the surface. Not enough transports. Not enough time. He thought of the politicians who had promised this treaty would bring peace, of the admirals who had ordered fleet dispersal, of every human world now exposed to predators who mistook mercy for cowardice. "Sir?" Jade's voice pulled him back. She stood beside him, close enough that he could see the fear she was suppressing, the trust she placed in his decision. Marcus straightened, his voice cutting through the bridge's mounting panic. "Launch all evacuation shuttles. Recall Dr. Cross from the research lab. And someone tell me if we still have the prototype weapons online." Jade's eyes widened slightly before she nodded, understanding flooding her features. "Aye, Captain." As alarms began wailing across the ship, Marcus Reed made his choice. Humanity's silence had been mistaken for surrender. It was time to teach the galaxy the difference. The hidden weapon. The corridor lights flickered red as Dr. Nathaniel Cross burst onto the bridge, his lab coat stained with chemical residue. Behind him strode engineer Sienna Blake, carrying a data tablet that glowed with complex equations. Marcus felt his chest tighten seeing her. 5 years since they'd served together, since duty had torn them apart when she'd chosen the research division over field command. "You called for miracles, Captain?" Nathaniel's voice carried dark humor. The physicist's silver-streaked hair was wild, his eyes bright with the fever of a man who'd been waiting for this moment. "Tell me you have something," Marcus said, watching the Vortan fleet tighten their formation on the tactical display. "Anything." Sienna stepped forward, and for a heartbeat their eyes met. Marcus saw the years between them collapse. Remembered nights discussing strategy, stolen moments before deployments, the choice she'd made that had shattered them both. "We have Project Singularity," she said quietly. "Nathaniel's been developing it for 3 years. It manipulates quantum probability fields," Nathaniel explained rapidly. "Essentially, it makes enemy weapons more likely to malfunction, their shields more likely to fail, while reinforcing our own systems. But it's untested, unstable, and will it work?" Marcus interrupted. Nathaniel and Sienna exchanged glances. "It should," Sienna answered. "But the power requirements are massive. We'll drain every system on the ship. Life support, engines, communications, everything goes to the weapon." Jade pulled up a countdown timer. 4-ton attack in 7 minutes. On the planet below, the last evacuation shuttles lifted off, their engines straining. Marcus watched 3,000 souls escape into the black, knowing thousands more hadn't made it. The Vortan flagship, a monstrous vessel bristling with plasma cannons, moved into firing position. "How long to activate?" Marcus asked. 4 minutes, Sienna replied. I need to be in the weapons bay to calibrate it manually. The AI can't handle the quantum fluctuations. I'll go with her, Jade volunteered immediately. Marcus shook his head. I need you on weapons control. Sienna. He caught her arm as she turned. The touch sent electricity through his fingers. Come back. Her green eyes softened. Always do, Captain. But her voice carried doubt. As Sienna disappeared into the corridor, Nathaniel moved to the science station. Marcus, there's something you should know about singularity. The probability field doesn't just affect machinery. Anyone near the emitter when it fires? Later, Nathaniel. Marcus cut him off, watching the Vortan fleet on screen. War Master Dravik's face appeared on the view screen, a scarred warrior whose reputation for brutality preceded him. Human vessel, you remain. Dravik's voice was a growl. Foolish. Witness your world burn. The Vortan fleet opened fire. Lance beams of superheated plasma screamed across space, turning the black void into a hellscape of light and fury. The first volley struck the horizon's edge shields, sending shockwaves through the hull. Shields at 60%, Jade reported, her knuckles white on her console. Marcus gripped his command chair. Sienna, status? 2 minutes, her voice crackled through the static. Marcus, about what we said before I transferred, focus on the weapon, he ordered, but his voice softened. We'll talk after. That's a promise? Another volley hit. The lights died, replaced by emergency red. The ship groaned like a wounded beast. In the weapons bay, Sienna's hands flew across holographic controls, her heart pounding. She thought of Marcus, of the man she'd loved, still loved, even as duty kept them apart. If this failed, at least her last act would be protecting him. Singularity online, she whispered. God help us all. The dance of fire, the horizon's edge shuddered as Sienna activated Project Singularity. Energy coursed through conduits never meant to handle such power, and reality itself seemed to ripple around the ship. On the bridge, Marcus watched the tactical display transform into something impossible. Captain, their weapons, they're misfiring. Jade's voice rose with disbelief. Vortan Cruiser 3 just fired on their own formation. Through the viewport, the Vortan fleet descended into chaos. Plasma beams curved mid-flight, striking Allied vessels. Shield generators exploded without warning. It was as if probability itself had turned against them. All power to engines, Marcus commanded. Devon, I need you to be a ghost. Pilot Officer Devon Hart, a young man with nerves of steel and reflexes that bordered on precognitive, grinned fiercely. Copy that, sir. Hold on to something. The horizon's edge lurched forward, diving beneath the Vortan flagship's ventral cannons. Devon wove through the fleet with impossible precision, threading between warships as they fired on each other in confusion. The research vessel, never meant for combat, became a needle stitching through the fabric of battle. Sienna, status? Marcus called into the comm. Her voice came back strained, breathless. The field is holding, but it's pulling energy from life support. We have maybe 10 minutes before... Static cut her off. Sienna. Marcus's hand clenched the armrest. Jade glanced at him, seeing the fear he couldn't hide. I'm here. Sienna's voice returned. Marcus, listen. When this is over, when we survive this, I need you to know that leaving was the hardest thing I ever did. Every day since, Tell me face to face, Marcus interrupted, his voice rough with emotion. That's an order, Engineer Blake. Explosion rocked the ship as a Vortan torpedo grazed their hull. Devon twisted the horizon's edge into a roll that would have torn apart most vessels, sliding between two colliding enemy cruisers. Fire bloomed in space, beautiful and terrible. War Master Dravik's face appeared on screen, his features contorted with rage. What sorcery is this? No human technology. You wanted to see what humanity could do. Marcus cut him off, standing from his chair. You mistook our silence for weakness, our diplomacy for cowardice. Learn this lesson well, Dravik. We chose peace. You chose war. Now face the consequences. Jade fired the horizon's edge's modest weapons, railguns that would barely scratch a Vortan hull under normal circumstances. But with singularity active, probability twisted. Each shot found weak points, pierced failing shields, struck ammunition stores. 3 Vortan destroyers erupted in cascading explosions. They're breaking formation, Commander Stone reported. The flagship is trying to retreat. Devon brought the ship around, dancing through debris fields with grace that defied physics. Their engines are failing, Captain. The probability field is eating their power cores. In the weapons bay, Sienna felt the deck heating beneath her feet. Warning lights cascaded across her console. The weapon was overloading, burning through safeguards. Blood trickled from her nose, side effects Nathaniel had warned about. Reality this close to the emitter was breaking down. "Marcus," she whispered into the comm, "I love you." "I've always loved you. If I don't stop." His voice was fierce, desperate. "You're coming back." "That's not a request." Through the viewport, she watched the horizon's edge carve through the Vortan fleet like vengeance incarnate. Each impossible maneuver, each perfect shot, it was humanity refusing to kneel. It was Marcus showing the galaxy what mercy had hidden. The Vortan flagship's engines detonated. The massive vessel began a slow, inevitable tumble into Meridian Prime's gravity well, trailing fire and atmosphere. "All enemy vessels retreating or destroyed," Jade announced, her voice trembling with exhaustion and triumph. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. "Devin, get us to the research bay. Medical team, stand by." He opened a channel. Sienna shut it down. "We won." In the weapons bay, Sienna's hands shook as she initiated the shutdown sequence. The quantum field collapsed and reality snapped back with crushing force. She collapsed, and the last thing she heard was Marcus's voice shouting her name. The battle was over. Humanity had spoken, and the galaxy would never mistake their silence again. The Empire trembles. 3 days after the Battle of Meridian Prime, the recordings reached the Vortan throne world. Empress Zephyra sat in her crystalline chamber, surrounded by holographic displays showing the impossible defeat on endless repeat. Her 4 eyes tracked each moment, watching her fleet crumble, watching a single human vessel dance through fire, watching War Master Dravik's flagship burn. "Explain this," she commanded, her voice like grinding stone. Admiral Cross knelt before her, his armor stripped of rank insignia. Around the throne room, the Vortan High Command stood in rigid silence. They had ruled this sector for 3 centuries through superior firepower and ruthless tactics. Never had they faced an enemy who turned probability itself into a weapon. "The humans possess technology beyond our understanding, Majesty," Cross said, his voice hollow. "Our intelligence suggested they dismantled their weapons programs." "Your intelligence was worthless," Zephyra interrupted. She rose from her throne, towering over the disgraced admiral. "You saw disarmament and assumed surrender. You saw peace treaties and assumed fear. You underestimated them." She gestured, and guards dragged Cross away. His execution would be public, a message to the Empire. Failure would not be tolerated. But even as she made the command, Zephyra felt something unfamiliar coiling in her chest. Fear. Across the Vortan Empire, the recordings spread like poison. Citizens watched human ingenuity defeat Vortan might. Soldiers whispered in barracks that perhaps the enemy was not as weak as propaganda claimed. Colonies on the border began fortifying defenses, not against humans, but in case the Empire decided to sacrifice them next. On the horizon's edge, docked at Meridian Prime's orbital station, Sienna Blake woke in the medical bay. Her head pounded and her body ached as if she'd been torn apart and reassembled. Marcus sat beside her bed, his hand holding hers, his eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights. "You're awake," he breathed, relief flooding his features. "Did we win?" Her voice was hoarse. "You won," Marcus corrected. "Your weapon broke them." Sienna struggled to sit up. "Nathaniel, where is he?" Marcus's expression darkened. "He needs to tell you something." "About singularity." Dr. Nathaniel Cross entered, looking older than his 50 years. He carried a data tablet, its screen filled with medical scans and equations. "Sienna, I'm sorry. I should have been more forthright about the weapon's effects." "What effects?" she asked, though dread was already forming in her stomach. Nathaniel sat down heavily. "The quantum probability field doesn't just affect external systems. Anyone in direct contact with the emitter, anyone close to its core during activation, experiences cellular-level quantum destabilization. Your DNA was exposed to probability fluctuations." "In plain language, Nathaniel," Marcus said sharply. "The weapon is killing her," Nathaniel said quietly. "Slowly. The exposure is degrading her cellular structure. Without treatment we don't have the technology to provide. She has maybe 2 years." Silence filled the medical bay. Sienna looked at her hands, steady despite the death sentence. Marcus's grip tightened on her fingers, his jaw clenched so hard she heard teeth grind. "How long have you known?" Marcus asked, his voice dangerously soft. "I theorized it," Nathaniel admitted. "But the weapon was necessary. Without it, everyone on Meridian Prime dies. With it, we save 3,000 souls at the cost of... He couldn't finish. At the cost of the woman I love, Marcus finished for him. Sienna pulled her hand from Marcus's, cupping his face. Hey, look at me. We bought humanity time. We showed the galaxy we can't be pushed around. 2 years is enough to make that count. It's not enough, Marcus said, his voice breaking. Outside the medical bay, Jade stood with Devon and Commander Stone, listening through the door. Jade wiped her eyes roughly. There has to be something. Some way to reverse it. Not with our technology, Devon said quietly, but maybe with theirs. On the Vortan throne world, Empress Zephyra reviewed casualty reports. 16 warships destroyed, 4,000 soldiers dead. An entire fleet routed by inferior numbers. And for what? A colony world that produced agricultural goods. Majesty, her chief advisor ventured carefully. Perhaps diplomatic overtures. You suggest we negotiate? Zephyra's voice carried warning. I suggest we survive. The advisor replied. If one human research vessel can do this, what happens when their battle fleet arrives? What happens when they decide to retaliate? Zephyra returned to the recordings, watching the horizon's edge move with impossible grace, watching probability bend to human will. She thought of her empire, built on conquest, suddenly faced with prey that had teeth. Send an ambassador, she said finally. Not to negotiate surrender, ours or theirs, but to understand. If we must share this galaxy with humans, we do so knowing what they truly are. She paused, watching Marcus Reed's face on the screen. Calm, determined, dangerous. Not prey, she whispered. Never pray again. The New Dawn Meridian Prime sky was scarred with the trails of falling debris, remnants of the Vortan fleet burning through atmosphere. Marcus Reed stood in what had been the settlement's central plaza, now a crater surrounded by collapsed buildings. Reconstruction crews worked around him, their tools singing as they began rebuilding what war had destroyed. Captain, Jade's voice came through his earpiece. The Vortan ambassador's shuttle is requesting docking clearance. Granted, Marcus replied. And Jade? Full military honors. Let them see we can be gracious in victory. He found Sienna at the memorial wall, where 347 names had been carved, colonists who hadn't made it to the evacuation shuttles. She stood with her arms wrapped around herself, thin despite medical treatment, her skin pale. 2 months had passed since the battle. The effects of singularity were accelerating. You should be resting, Marcus said softly, coming to stand beside her. I've got time to rest later, Sienna replied, but her smile was sad. Marcus, when the Vortan ambassador arrives, I want to be there. Nathaniel thinks I'm dying. He's right, but I'm not dead yet, and I want to see what we bought with our sacrifice. She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. Besides, you promised me we'd talk. After the battle. That's a promise you've been avoiding. Marcus pulled her close, feeling how fragile she'd become. I was an idiot, he said into her hair. When you chose research over field command, I thought you were abandoning me. Abandoning us. I was too proud to follow, too angry to understand you were trying to save lives your own way. I was scared, Sienna admitted. Scared that if I stayed close to you, I'd lose myself in being your partner instead of finding who I was. But Marcus, I never stopped loving you. Not for one day. He tilted her chin up and they kissed. Soft, desperate, full of everything they'd lost and everything they were trying to reclaim. Around them, reconstruction crews politely averted their eyes, giving their captain and the woman who'd saved them all a moment of privacy. The Vortan ambassador arrived under triple guard. Ambassador Nexus was smaller than typical Vortan warriors, his armor ceremonial rather than functional. He stood in the crater plaza, looking at the destruction, at the humans rebuilding with grim determination. Captain Reed, Nexus's translator rendered his clicks and whistles into human language. Empress Zephyra sends her regards and an acknowledgement. We underestimated your species. We assumed mercy meant weakness. We were incorrect. Yes, you were, Marcus replied, his voice hard. Sienna stood beside him, and Jade flanked his other side, her hand near her sidearm. Nexus gestured to the ruins. War serves neither of our peoples. The Empress proposes a new treaty, not of surrender but of mutual respect. Humanity has earned its place at the table of galactic powers. At the cost of how many lives? Sienna asked quietly. How many colonies did your empire crush before you learned this lesson? Nexus's eyes flickered. A Vortan gesture Marcus had learned meant shame. Too many. Our expansion was built on the assumption that might made right. Your captain proved that determination and ingenuity defeat brute force. It is humbling. Dr. Nathaniel Cross stepped forward carrying a sealed container. Ambassador, I have a proposal. Your medical technology is centuries ahead of ours in cellular regeneration. I'm transmitting specifications of our quantum weapon and its effects on human biology. In exchange for this data, I'm asking for access to your biomedical research. Nexus studied Nathaniel, then Sienna. Understanding dawned in his eyes. The weapon that defeated us is killing the one who wielded it. Yes, Marcus said flatly. And if you want peace between our peoples, you'll help us save her. For a long moment, Nexus was silent. Then he bowed, a human gesture he'd clearly learned for this meeting. I will transmit your request to the Empress. But Captain Reed, understand that what you ask may not be possible even with our technology. Then we'll find another way, Marcus replied. Humanity doesn't accept impossible. 3 weeks later, Vortan medical specialists arrived with equipment that looked more like art than science. They worked alongside human doctors, bridging centuries of technological gap in desperate collaboration. Sienna endured treatments that rewrote her cellular structure one molecule at a time. Marcus never left her side. During the long nights they talked, really talked about everything they'd missed. About the years apart, about regrets and hopes, about a future that was no longer guaranteed but still worth fighting for. You know what the worst part is? Sienna said one evening, her hand in his. If I had to do it again, I'd still pull that trigger. I'd still activate singularity. I know, Marcus said. That's what makes you extraordinary. The Vortan doctors delivered their prognosis on a cold morning. Sienna's cellular degradation had been halted, but not reversed. She would live, but how long remained uncertain. Years, perhaps. Maybe decades if the treatments continued. It was enough. Meridian Prime's reconstruction continued. The settlement rebuilt, stronger than before, with combined human Vortan technology. The galaxy watched nervously as two species that should have been enemies forged something new from the ashes of war. Marcus Reed and Sienna Blake stood at the memorial wall one last time before returning to the horizon's edge. The ship had been repaired, upgraded and commissioned for deep space exploration, with both human and Vortan crew members. Ready for the next adventure? Marcus asked. Sienna smiled, color returning to her cheeks. As long as it's with you. They walked together toward the shuttle, hands intertwined, while above them the stars shone with new promise. Humanity had been tested and emerged not as conquerors, but as survivors, as warriors, as people who would never again be mistaken for prey. The galaxy had learned its lesson, and a new dawn broke across the stars, built not on silence but on the thunder of humanity's defiant heart. The end.